Well, some of my earliest memories are of the woods. Our parents would take us out in the woods and we would very carefully step off trail. Now, step where I step so we don't step on anything. We're going to go off trail and see the bloodroot. And so these wildflowers are literally things that my brother and I grew up with. Ecologically, most of the plant diversity in native woodland in this area are the herbaceous plants on the floor. There are 10 or 20 species of native trees that generally populate woods here, but there are scores of plants that are not woody that live on the forest floor, so most of the plant diversity here comes from things like wildflowers. Having a diversity of plants in the woodland supports a greater diversity of animals, and that's what makes an environment so rich. A woods that's basically a few maple trees and a lot of honeysuckle won't have a lot of different animals in it either. Both of my parents already loved nature. They'd both been in scouting. My mother had learned some wildflowers from her mother when she was very young. And so when they married and moved to Evendale on Glendale Milford Road, they didn't have much money, but they used it to buy the property next door to the house and let the trees grow up, just because they wanted some extra land and some nature nearby. And then a friend of my father's started giving him wildflowers from a farm that the friend owned in Middletown. And then my father started seeking out places that were about to be, he'd notice a place that was going to be developed, and he'd go explore it and find there are lots of wildflowers here. And so by the time I was in grade school, our typical spring break week from school, my father would take it off work, and every day we'd go out to some place and rescue wildflowers. My mother was a PhD chemist, and she was a scientist through and through. She was very observant, very interested in seeing patterns and documenting everything. And so I think she started documenting the wildflowers because we were bringing them in, and so she made lists of where we brought them from and what we brought, and she'd note, because they disappear at the end of the spring, she would make notes about where we had put them so that she could find them the next year. And she was already keeping bird lists. So for 40 years, she kept weekly records of all the birds she observed on the property, and I contributed a lot to that when I was in high school as well. And so her records of the wildflowers, every few days she'd go out and she'd go around the woods, which was about an acre, so you could actually look everywhere. She'd write down, well, what's up, what's blooming, what has finished blooming. And so these records became a very important scientific data set. It's the sort of data that no professional scientist is paid to collect. So it's amateur nature lovers who collect this sort of data. And I am using her data now to track when do different things bloom, how related is that in a given year to that year's weather, and as the climate changes, what changes are we seeing in when different flowers bloom. Back when the Gorman Farm was first donated as a nonprofit, my parents volunteered here and they did a plant survey of the entire Gorman property. And that's when they met Sandra Murphy. After Sandra had been the director here and my parents' property became severely threatened, Tricia and Sandra and I and the board all talked, and we decided that the best way to make the flowers accessible to the public, which was part of what my parents wanted, was to bring them here.
Drossett Wildflower Sanctuary is indeed a sanctuary. It's a place where people come for respite, to sit, just to enjoy the birds and the flowers and all kinds of things. It's something about being out in nature is very restful, and it helps people relax and appreciate.
The wildflowers in this space are protected. There are several threats to wildflowers today in this area. One is white-tailed deer. There are so many deer now, and they prefer to eat native species. And a number of the species that we have here disappeared from our family property decades ago. Plants like the bush honeysuckle, the lesser celandine, that they've escaped. We brought them here from other continents. They like it here. They outcompete the native plants, and if we don't have places that we protect from them, there won't be the native plants anymore. They're already becoming much rarer than the invasives. So here, because somebody walks through here every couple of days, if we find a sprig of honeysuckle or a plant from a species that wants to take over, got in here by mistake, we dig it out right away. And that's the only way to protect these areas. My brother and I are so happy that this sanctuary is being successful. I now find that now that it has so many species in it, wandering around here and looking for things coming up is just like it was as a child going out in the woods to see what's coming up. And there's such a diversity here and so much beauty. I just hope that we continue to introduce more native species here. Maybe the fenced area will need to get bigger over time. And it's wonderful that it is in a place that staff care about it. It is easy to access for visitors. There are volunteers who come here to help look after it, and they learn more about wildflowers. I think because wildflowers are rarer than they used to be, and newer people are already familiar with these flowers, and it's really wonderful to be able to get more people more noticing of the native plants in the area.